안녕하세요. 부자아빠입니다. 2025년 시장을 정확히 예측해 굉장히 핫한 한 남자가 있습니다. 바로 마크 유스코인데요. 미국의 자산운용사 모건 크릭 캐피탈 매니지먼트의 설립자 겸 최고 경영자로 알려져 있어요. 월가에서도 비트코인에 대한 정확한 예측을 하기로 유명한 인물인 만큼 이 사람의 이야기를 귀담아 들어볼 필요가 있는 것 같습니다. 영상 중간중간에 뒷받침할 수 있는 근거와 제 생각들을 더했으니 이미 보신 분들도 다른 느낌으로 다가올 것 같아요. 그럼 영상 보시죠.
Ah, so many things. So many people had their expectations built up positively for the halving that you have this parabolic move right after the halving, and that clearly didn't happen. You saw a pretty meaningful sell down from 74,000 all the way down to 53,000. I think that caught a lot of people off guard. On the same day as the approval of the Bitcoin ETFs, the CME released a whole bunch of additional futures products that essentially increased the liquidity pool for people to take the opposite side, right? You can go short futures, you go long the ETF, have a market neutral trade, but that constant selling in the futures market puts a cap on upward trajectory of prices and even could put downward pressure if somebody else piles on and goes naked short. So this downward relentless pressure finally dissipated in September, and we made this really rocket ship move all the way back to new all-time highs. And the nice thing is we've seen this accumulation pattern again, higher highs and higher lows.
실제 CME 헤지펀드 포지션 차트를 체크해 보겠습니다. 보시는 이 레버리지 펀드 보고서가 헤지펀드의 포지션 차트인데요. 여기 보시면 2024년 3월에 헤지펀드의 숏 포지션이 크게 증가했을 때 이 자리죠. 이때 당시 비트코인은 크게 빠졌던 걸 다들 아실 겁니다. 그리고 비트코인이 100K를 넘겼을 때도 헤지펀드의 숏 포지션은 엄청나게 급증을 했었고요. 이해를 돕기 위해서 헤지펀드에 대해 간단히 설명드리면 헤지펀드란 쉽게 말해 초고수익을 목표로 다양한 투자 전략을 사용하는 펀드입니다. 일반적으로 주식이나 채권 투자는 다르게 훨씬 더 공격적으로 돈을 벌기 위해 설계된 투자 방식이라고 이해하시면 됩니다. 그리고 비트의 깊은 조정과 하락이 나오면서 현재는 비트가 약 70K 수준이었을 때만큼 하락한 상태입니다. 이때 비하면 여전히 높은 수치이긴 하지만 그래도 과열이 많이 해소되었다고 볼 수 있겠네요. 그래서 이 데이터는 마크 유스코의 의견에 신빙성을 더해주는 것 같습니다. 계속 이어서 보시죠.
So, according to your view, Trump's election served as the main catalyst that inverted this trend.
Well, no, it was an accelerator. I think it was more the tail as opposed to the dog. I think the dog is the fact that there's new money coming into this market. The big buyers, right? Some of the other, global large owners continued to buy, and the ETFs just relentless buying. But if no one's willing to sell, then the bid has to keep coming up to encourage people to part with their Bitcoin. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
There was another thing that probably surprised you because I remember that back in January, you were saying that you were not really expecting an Ethereum ETF in the US to be
Yeah.
approved anytime soon. Eventually, we saw that happening in the summer, but it didn't seem to have such a big effect, a big success as the Bitcoin ETF.
Yeah, no, I was a little surprised. I thought Gensler had been very clear that he wasn't going to allow that to happen. But just like with the Bitcoin ETF, he didn't want that either. But eventually, he had to relent. And I give the ETH people a lot of credit for getting that through. But to your point, a surprise was that there wasn't the same follow through in price. There was some demand for the ETF. And I think the reason for that is Bitcoin, digital gold, store of value, that mantra, I think is acceptable to big institutional investors, sovereign wealth, etc. The ETH use case, smart contracts, platform, toolkit, it's like, well, maybe, but what about this Solana thing? And what about this Avalanche thing? And what about these other things that I hear about that are better and faster and cheaper? And, so don't think there was as much universal acceptance of the use case and the investment thesis as there was for Bitcoin.
Yeah, that sounds like the reason. By the way, now I would like to talk about your outlook for 2025. So, what are the milestones that you are looking forward to in 2025? I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about the Bitcoin strategic reserve, but maybe
Yeah.
you have hope to other.
So, look, I am still a believer that the 4-year cycle exists. I know there are some now saying that, because of Trump and because of the Bitcoin strategic reserve, and, there's going to be this massive movement toward accumulating Bitcoin and the 4-year cycle is going to go out the window. Nah, I'm going to bet that humans are going to human. So, my expectation for this year was that fair value, which post halving was going to be in the, 80,000-ish range, somewhere like that, would continue to accrete all the way to somewhere around 100K by where we are today. So to me, fair value is right around that 6-digit level. I figured we would blow through that 6-digit number, and then humans would human. The humans would come in and they'd start to lever up, and we'd see a parabolic move probably to 120, maybe even 150. This time in 25, it'll be April-ish, and that would kind of make sense a year after the halving. So at that point, we'd hit that ebullient level.
유스코가 이 영상을 찍었을 당시 비트코인은 거의 11만 달러를 찍었었죠. 이후에 유스코가 말하던 적정 가치인 이 8만 달러 부근에서 가격이 머물고 있습니다. 그럼 유스코의 예상대로라면 4월까지 15만 불을 찍어줘야겠죠. 4월까지 15만 불을 찍을 수 있을지 장담할 순 없지만 11월 트럼프 당선 이후에 한 달 만에 67K에서 108K까지 올랐으니까 이거를 그대로 대입해보면 대략 12만 7천 달러, 약 12에서 13만 불 사이 가격이 나옵니다. 즉 한 달 만에 이 정도가 오르는 게 불가능하지는 않을 수 있겠네요.
Then the question is, do we get the passage of the strategic Bitcoin reserve? Do we get, Tom Lee was on CNBC talking about this, saying that, the exchanges don't have enough Bitcoin on their platforms and people are going to be scrambling for it. Certainly possible. Could that push us well past that 150K range? It's certainly possible.
그리고 전략적 준비금은 승인이 났죠. 그럼 유스코가 말한 1비트코인당 15만 불을 올해 도달할 수 있는 조건은 갖춰진 것 같습니다. 그럼 마크 유스코가 왜 비트코인이 15만 달러를 갈 수 있다고 생각하는지 나머지 뒷이야기를 들어볼게요.
If you think about a bell curve distribution, to me the most likely is we get to fair value, we go to call it 50% premium above fair value, so that's in that 150 range. And then, unfortunately, we have another bear market starting mid-year 2025, and we enter crypto winter again. Now, those who think that crypto winter is never going to come again, I'm pretty skeptical of that, personally. I mean, history is, it's interesting. I ask people this all the time. Look at parabolic charts. Show me one. And all I want to see is one. No one's ever been able to show me one. Show me a parabolic chart that goes parabolic and then goes flat, a new higher plateau. None of them do that, right? They go parabolic and they keep going parabolic and then eventually they go down.
여기서부터 2025년 전망에 대한 이야기가 나오는데 이 부분 중요합니다.
So your outlook seemed to me quite realistic if compared to the one we heard from Samson Mao, who came on our show lately. He was saying that he expects Bitcoin to reach $1 million next year. What can you say about that prediction?
I think Samson's a great thinker on this. And but let's just do some math, right? Now, the challenge I have with that is a $20 trillion market cap. So we just hit 2 trillion, or we're just under 2 trillion. A 10x from here means $20 trillion. Well, $20 trillion, what has to happen for this asset to be worth 20 trillion? So people have said it's digital gold, right? Well, all of the gold in the world above ground is like $12 trillion. Well, only half of that counts because half of it is jewelry and chalices and gold leaf and gold bars. That really doesn't count. Well, the gold bars do because they're part of the monetary base. The monetary value of gold is about 6 trillion. So we're a third of the way there already. So the idea that the monetary base, if Bitcoin is digital gold and it needs to replace the base layer of gold in central banks around the world, 6-ish trillion is plenty. Now, you say, but that's not all going to be owned by central banks because there's individual holders. Okay, well, those central banks have got to buy it from somebody, and those sellers, people say, well, I'm never going to sell. Well, okay, but someone's got to sell for someone to buy. That's the way markets work. They can't make more out of thin air like fiat currency. So in that environment, Samson's point is interesting because if I'm a central bank and I say I have to buy 200,000 coins, and Tom Lee says there's no one to sell it to me, well, then I got to keep bidding the price up. So could you see a parabolic move? Sure. But the problem I see with that is if the monetary aggregate base has to increase so much in order to displace gold, what does that do to overall prices of everything? Probably not a very good thing. And what does that do for overall economic activity? Probably not a very good thing. And then what does that do for future demand? So it's all interconnected.
이 말에 조금 더 부연 설명을 해볼게요. 현재 전 세계 금의 시총은 약 2경 7천조 원, 구성하고 있는 비율을 세부적으로 나눠보면 예물 및 액세서리가 46%, 투자용금이 22%, 중앙은행 보유금이 약 17%, 그리고 산업용이나 나머지 기타 등등 해서 15% 정도인데요. 마크 유스코는 이 중에 금의 실제 화폐 가치가 6조 달러 정도 된다고 했는데 제가 조사한 데이터에 따르면 7.3조 달러로 원화로 약 1경이 조금 안 됩니다. 현재 비트코인의 시총이 2,400조 원 정도이니까 실제 화폐 가치 금 대비로는 4분의 1 정도가 되는 거죠. 그럼 비트코인은 금이랑 다르게 액세서리나 상업용으로 사용하진 않으니까 금의 화폐적 가치에 대입을 하게 되면 비트코인이 디지털 골드로서 골드의 시총을 따라잡는다고 했을 때 비트코인 한 개당 적정 가치가 맥스 값으로 잡아도 약 40만 불 정도가 되겠죠. 그 이후의 가격은 일단 한 개당 40만 불 정도에 도달하고 난 이후에 생각해봐도 늦지 않을 것 같네요. 그렇기 때문에 현실적으로는 빠른 시간 내에 1비트코인당 100만 달러에 도달하기는 수치적으로 쉽지 않다는 겁니다. 마지막으로 마크 유스코는 알트코인에 대해서 어떻게 생각하는지 들어볼게요.
So as a final question, I wanted to get your outlook on altcoins for 2025. Are there any specific altcoins out there? Who are you excited about?
We don't trade them. In fact, I was talking on a show last week about this, that we historically don't play in that area. And the reason is our funds, 70% of the money goes into equity of businesses that support the digital asset ecosystem. 30% goes into the liquid protocols themselves. But we tend to stay in the Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Uniswap, things that we think have a long-term future, kind of the picks and shovels of the digital age. So I have historically been, pretty open-minded, but pretty anti things like XRP and Cardano and Hedera, because I couldn't see anyone building on them. I've been doing venture capital in the space for almost 7 years. I've never met a Cardano developer, not one. Now, I'm sure, and then somebody put out on the page, so, all you developers, call Mark. I still haven't gotten a call. So if you're out there, call me. I struggle with Ethereum a little bit because someone asked me the question. I thought it was a good question. He said, if Ethereum didn't exist and was invented today, would anybody use it? It's a very interesting question, right? It's more expensive and slower than the competitors. So if it didn't have this giant installed base because it was first, would people use it? I think the answer is no. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to bail on Ethereum. That's not my point, but it was an interesting perspective. So that explains why Solana and Avalanche and other things have done well.
자, 여기까지 영상을 보고 나면 비트는 괜찮겠는데 알트가 많이 걱정된다 생각이 들 겁니다. 이렇게 생각해 보면 될 것 같아요. 알트코인에 대한 견해는 전문가들마다 제각각이기 때문에 이 한 사람의 견해가 완벽하게 정답이다 라고 볼 수는 없는 것 같습니다. 비트가 15만 불을 가면 여기서 거의 2배인데 알트코인들이 회복이 안 될까요? 분명 많이 오르고 적게 오르는 종목이 있겠지만 비트가 15만 불을 가면 알트 역시도 충분히 상승 가능하다고 생각합니다. 비트가 신고점 갱신할 때 알트들이 꽤 많이 오르는 걸 경험하셨잖아요. 그렇기 때문에 오늘의 영상은 이런 견해도 있다는 점에 대해서 참고 정도로 봐주시면 될 것 같습니다. 영상 끝까지 시청해 주셔서 감사하고 구독과 좋아요 눌러주시면 감사하겠습니다. 즐거운 주말 되세요. 감사합니다.